Emma, it's so nice to meet you. We have a mutual friend, Roland Brown, and anybody that's a friend of Roland's is a friend of mine. So nice to meet you. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. So we have so much to talk about. I don't even know where to begin. So I'm going to do this. We're filming this. We're still in COVID. Two different countries. You're in the UK. I'm in the US. We were actually just chatting about that beforehand. Let me just go in kind of a random order. You did something totally cool, totally amazing. You initiated this hashtag LocktheSaxDown initiative. Can you talk about that? Because that was so cool. That was brilliant.
Yeah, sure. So I co-created it with a composer named Jenny Watson, and both of us studied at the same place. But I mean, we're 10 years apart. So we never actually studied together, but because of the alumni system that they have there and various events and stuff, you always meet people that studied years before you and stuff. So we got to know each other, and I commissioned her to write me a piece. I think it was a couple of years ago for a recital that I was giving. And I said that I would love to record her compositions for saxophone and piano with my duo partner. But then COVID hit, so we couldn't do that. So I suggested to her, okay, why don't we create some backing tracks instead? I make a demo video, we release it online, and then we make available 1 minute of the music and the backing so that people can learn it, put their versions online, use a hashtag, which we came up with, LocktheSaxDown, because lockdown, saxophone, and then, it will be one, promoting her music, two, creating practice goals for people, because that's been something that's been so hard for everyone, is having the motivation and drive to keep practicing over lockdown. And actually, it's gone so well. We've had so many people get involved. I think it was 16 countries or something crazy like that. And there's been a community that's come out of it, and we've made a Facebook group so everyone can communicate with each other, and it's gone so well. It's been such a good thing for us as well, to keep us motivated to help everybody else too. So we were releasing them on a weekly basis. We started, I think it was last May or something like that, so it's been going on for a good while now. And and it went so well that we thought, oh gosh, we have to do something more with this. So we then wanted to do the album. So we got a fully funded Kickstarter project to do a professionally recorded CD of the music.
That's awesome. And talk a little bit more about that. So what's the name of the album going to be? When is it coming out?
So the name is a secret right now. Okay. So we haven't told anyone about what the name is. We're going to drop that one soon. And we don't have a specific release date, because that was mainly because with it having to be remote and all the mixing sessions have to be either on Zoom or you're sending notes back and forth. You can't go into the studio together and have a mixing session. We haven't done that. So it's been a lengthy process, more than we anticipated. But so basically what it is all of the LocktheSaxDown pieces that we released is half the disc, and the other half is new music. So Jen actually wrote me a new piece based on this whole thing, because we literally speak to each other every single day about what the next release would be. So she knows me so well as a player. So she wanted to write me a new piece. So we did that, and we've co-written stuff together based on improvisation and loads of stuff. So it's half all new, fresh music, and half of it is the LocktheSaxDown stuff. So there's going to be some familiar parts to that. And it's all with tracks. So Jen's a multi-instrumentalist. She plays violin, saxophone, she sings, she plays flute, clarinet, so much, piano. So we've created these tracks together remotely, and we'll be releasing them soon. But that's kind of the gist of it. Yeah.
This is so interesting, and congratulations on this. Now,
Thank you.
Yeah, let me ask you, so can you talk a little bit about, because you're a classical musician, so the backing tracks, this is interesting, as a jazz musician myself, how in terms of the backing tracks, how did that work in terms of classical? Did you give people not only the 1 minute of the backing track, but also the sheet music for what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we gave 1 minute or a section of the dots available as sheet music, and then they would have the backing, and there would sometimes be one with click as well if they wanted to record to click. But there was some improvisation required in it too, because I'm not just classical. I do play a lot of pop music, folk, and a lot of improvisation based stuff as well. So there's a lot of crossover, and that's what her music is like. It's about combining genres and crossing over all the time, which is what I'm about really as a player. So, yeah.
Okay, I've got to ask a few questions. I'm gonna, of course, go off course of what I said we're going to talk about. Just awesome. All right, this is really intriguing to me. You mentioned, folk music. We haven't really had anybody on the show that played like folk music per se. We did have Gustavo Bogac, who plays, ethnic music and stuff. But can you talk about your experience with folk music and the types of things that you've done?
Yeah. So, the way I got into folk music, really, I'm the saxophone player with Riverdance. Do you know the show Riverdance?
Yes. So
I play with the show. I've been playing with them for almost 5 years. So that's the way I got introduced to kind of Irish traditional music. And then through that, with the other band members, I would then kind of dive into that genre. And it was a big part of my life and still is, really. It really influences the kind of music I listen to. And that gig is all on soprano sax. So there's a lot of elements that I would then take with improvisation and crossing over with classical and folk. And a lot of this stuff is folk influenced, the stuff on the album. And the way we've built some of the tracks is that she would send me a backing track and I would improvise layers and we would take a melody out of it. It wouldn't be, we compose everything, write it down. It's very free. So yeah, as well as, she's writing the pieces, but I will also contribute with a lot of the sax writing, some of them. And yeah, that influence comes out in the composition. And I would always, jam with people on the tour, and I love all that. So that's kind of how I got into it. I wouldn't be gigging with like a folk group, but it's definitely something I want to get into because it's a big part of my job. So yeah.
That's so interesting. And, a lot of people don't realize, they think that, improvisation is only jazz, but in the world of classical music, music was improvised many centuries ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I do a lot of classical improvisation in a classical style, a lot. And I really enjoy that. And it's something that I think bridges a gap, because I think the saxophone is such a versatile instrument. If you kind of pigeonhole yourself into I am just classical, which, for people that just love that, I mean, it's absolutely fine. But I'm not that sort of person. I need more, I'm a saxophone player, but I operate in so many different genres. And that's what this CD is trying to do, is trying to bridge the gap between classical, jazz, folk, pop, minimalism, all sorts of things. So that's the goal. And I think, we're still really excited about the music, and I think we've definitely achieved that in the writing and the production of it. So I can't wait to share it with everyone.
It sounds so exciting. And, I want to dive deep into the thought of, okay, so you're playing all these genres, right? How do you approach improvisation when you're dealing with folk music or with classical music or with popular music? Like, what's your mindset? What are you thinking? How are you developing ideas, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's all about, for me, just putting myself, sounds so weird, in that genre. So, I will listen. I think listening is just the most important thing. You take things from other people's performances. I listen to pop music all the time. I love it. And, it's a big part of what I do. But I also love listening to amazing jazz players, and I will try and combine them as much as I can, but also try and push myself in terms of learning licks and stuff like that, and testing them out in live performances. So that would be like more of a pop thing. With the folk stuff, saxophone is not common in folk music. If we're talking about, I don't know, Irish traditional music or anything like that, it is in the show, but it's not very common for people to play the saxophone with a classical sound, like a rounded soprano sound, but have the ability to improvise as well. That's kind of not normal. So I would always listen to, I don't know, inflections from the whistle player and try and create melodies out of something that is authentic to that style. if you see what I mean. So it's always about regurgitating melodic phrases and maybe modulating them, and it's all listening for me. It's not like I have a backlog of like jazz knowledge, because it's just something I didn't have. I didn't train in jazz, so it's, you know, so I just play to my own standard and try and take from the music. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. Let me ask another question, and I know people are going to want to know this.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you're playing all these different styles. Do you change your equipment in order to match the genre?
Yes. It depends what. I mean, for classical alto, I have my classical setup, but then I'd have like my Claude Lakey put on, do funk, fusion, pop, and all that kind of thing. But with soprano, it's actually always the same, because I love that direct soprano sound, and I think that the sop is so easily manipulated by your embouchure that actually, for me, the equipment change isn't necessary for mouthpiece and stuff like that.
Interesting. All right, let me first have you talk about the equipment that you have on each of the instruments, and then
Sure.
let's dive into soprano a little bit too, because we have a lot of people that, you know, do play soprano saxophone, and I haven't really had a guest that really like kind of dove into it.
Sure. Okay, so classical alto. So I play Selma saxophones. My classical alto setup is a C-star S80 with a Van Doren MO ligature and a 3 Van Doren standard blue box reed. The more pop stuff, I would be using a 3 Van Doren Java green box with a Claude Lakey mouthpiece. I think it's a 5 tip opening, I think. And then SOP is S80 C-star with 3.5 V12 Van Doren reeds in the standard Selma lig. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So with, and again, you know, different equipment for, you know, different types of genres and stuff like that. With let's go to the soprano saxophone for 1 second. Sure. And so I'm just going to ask you some basic questions, because we have people that span the, you know, the saxophone world, from very beginners to very advanced people, music educators, professionals, the whole 9 yards. But for a very beginner who wants to play soprano sax, when would you recommend that they start to pursue it? Should they start to pursue it right away, or should they play one of the other saxophones first? What kind of equipment would you recommend for them? That kind of thing.
Okay, very beginner. Man, I think alto is the one to start with. I think diving into SOP, you may actually be leaving out important fundamentals that you might be learning on an alto. I think it's just important to learn basic technique on an alto sax. But having said that, soprano completely sorts out your alto playing. If we're talking classical here, if you learn SOP, and you can play freely in the high register, your alto playing it goes up a gear, and you suddenly have so much flexibility. So I would definitely suggest to anyone that is taking saxophone seriously, I don't know, like going to music college, conservatoire standard, to always, you know, make sure they do practice and learn soprano sax, because it does really improve all the other ones. I find your flexibility, like I said, is just way better playing into the higher register, altissimo, all that kind of thing. It's just improved so much more if you play soprano sax. So in terms of setups, I would say a standard 3 Van Doren blue box reed is always like your safe option to start with. But you also want to play on a resistant enough reed to engage your core and to be breathing and blowing properly, rather than, you know, not having that resistance and breathing from all up in your chest. You know, you want to be getting a proper breathing technique. So I would say probably not soprano for beginners. I mean, if you love that and that's the only sax you're going to play, then that's, you know, your choice. I'm not saying don't do it, but for me, if you want to be a good all-rounder, I would say start with the alto, and then as you progress, pick up soprano, and because it just does sort out all the other saxes. And it did for me when I learned soprano. At the start, I couldn't even play up and get a high F. I was like, this is crazy. The feeling of it was like so different. You know, you needed so much more air. It needed to be more focused. It was requiring much more power. But then when you cracked it and go back to alto, you can be popping out those altissimo A's and just easy, so it's definitely worth it.
Now, are you referring to the resistance with the soprano? Because there is, just like the clarinet's going to have more resistance than the alto sax, right? So a lot of people that have started on clarinet and then played saxophones became great saxophonists. So in a way, this is kind of like an equivalent in a certain sense. I mean, you're not necessarily going to start it on soprano sax, but you start on the alto, and then when you take up the soprano sax after X amount of years, then it's just going to really bring your playing to the next level. But you think it's the resistance that's doing that?
I think because the soprano requires more control, I think, because, you need faster air, you need better breath control, and your tongue is therefore higher because the placement of each pitch is higher, right? So if we're talking about the voicing stuff, generally your tongue needs to be higher. When you go back onto the alto, then you're kind of used to that, and you can play, if you were struggling with altissimo or struggling to get a really focused sound in the higher register on alto, practicing soprano and then coming back is a really good way to help improve that. My experience anyway.
That's great tips. And really it is, because I think that's going to intrigue a lot of people. And even if they're not playing classical music, it would still be, it would still absolutely help people. And just what you said before was really interesting too. You want a reed that's going to give you enough resistance in there, and not a reed that's going to be too soft. And, I know people are going to have different opinions, because, a lot of popular music players will play reeds that are less strong in order to make more of the reed vibrate, of course. But I guess in terms of just conditioning and really learning the instrument, that was a really interesting tip.
Yeah, I think it does teach you to blow properly. I remember when I started learning, before I went to music college, I didn't know anything really about, advanced saxophone playing. I really didn't. I played on what I knew, and that was it. And then all this information was just given to me, and I was like a blank canvas. I just took it all in, which was actually the best thing that could have ever happened. I think when people go to music college with these pre-developed ideas, it can go one way or the other. You're either supported and encouraged with a similar idea as your teacher, or it's different and you've got to strip all that stuff back and start again. And I think that's harder. So when I was learning from literally nothing, the strength of the reed was, it was important. And I was told it was really important. So I was like, okay, right, cool. We've got to go with, 3.5. And that's not really strong, but in comparison to what I was playing, I mean, I think I was playing on jazz. We used to play classical music, and it was like super soft, and therefore it wasn't requiring much air, and you can kind of get away with it. But I mean, this is like, it shows where the gaps are, and when you develop a good breathing technique and you're using your air properly to create, and you can tell when the sound is really focused, especially on soprano, but on alto as well. And that really, really does help. And I always say that to my students, we want to be, if we're talking music college kind of level, or maybe a little bit under, we want to be on at least a 3 Van Doren Blue Box to be able to play the instrument properly,
Yeah. Now, let me also ask you, because I know you mentioned the word control. When you play soprano sax, you do have to have more control. And I feel it's because the intonation could go all over the place if you're certainly not hearing, what you need to be playing. But can you talk about and address intonation?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a voicing thing. I think if you're not used to playing an instrument that plays this high, you've no idea where to be pitching the notes in terms of where your tongue is, right? So I always think about whistling when I'm playing sop or pitching altissimo notes. So the way you'd whistle in the higher register, like, that would be a similar position to where I'd be moving my tongue to play those notes. So if I did that position with my tongue and pitched a note on soprano, I don't know, you could play like a palm D or a front F and be splitting the notes and try and pitch individual ones. That's a good practice technique, or get the crook and try and pitch the fundamentals. But in terms of intonation, getting used to your tongue position and getting that clarity of sound will improve intonation like amazingly. Otherwise, you'll be kind of swirling around in the top register, not really being able to pitch like a specific note, which is why practicing sop again helps you pitch altissimo on alto.
Yeah, no, okay, so so much great stuff here. First of all, whistling. Wow, can you whistle clearly?
That is useful, yeah.
It is, and some people will say, well, I can't whistle clearly. And I would tend to think that if you did a silent whistle, I mean, not as clear as you, but even something like that would still...
It's the same position, yeah.
Right. I have my students sing, and then, always get the question, well, I can't sing that high. Well, you sing in the highest, like, A that you can, you know what I mean? It's the same type of idea, but the whistling, that was really cool.
Yeah, I try and think, and even my younger students, I have a student who's 10 years old, and she's like super beginner, and I love working with beginners because I feel like, okay, if I can take this really young student and eliminate all these bad habits straight away and make them understand all of this stuff from the get-go, I'm going to have an incredible player on my hands in like a few years' time. And they just absorb all the information. So I said to her, can you whistle? And kids, they don't care. They will just do this stuff without being embarrassed. So I said, okay, think about, when you're playing low, you want to create a big space in your mouth. So how low can you whistle? And she'd be like, you wouldn't hear a noise as such, but she's getting like the position. And I feel like that's the most relatable way to describe it. I mean, I've got a couple of tutorials because I do a few on like my Instagram or YouTube and stuff like that with, I don't know, here is a good idea. If you can whistle, this is a relatable tip, like pitch the notes as you would when you're whistling. But if you can't whistle, here are a few exercises to use that, could help you if that's something you can't do. So yeah, there's kind of flexibility there, but the whistling is for sure a relatable tip that I've experienced,
And we're definitely going to share your links at the end. So stay tuned, folks. Okay. Cause you're going to want to definitely check this out for sure. Now I'm going to, it's not a left turn totally. Okay. But we've kind of alluded to it. Let's get into your past, how you started on the saxophone.
Yeah.
I know where you went to college, but I want you to actually start from the very beginning and going through college and what it was like for you, the first instruments you started on, who your mentors were, as growing up and all that kind of thing.
Okay. So I started playing the flute when I was 7. And it was more like my mum, she wanted me to have the chance to play an instrument. I think, I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and it's the same for all of us. She wanted us to all have the chance. And if we took to it, that's great. If not, at least we had a go, So it was the flute for me. And I think I chose that. I think she didn't want me to play the violin because I don't think she wanted that in the house. So I was like, okay, the flute, that sounds fun. And so I picked it up, played in my school orchestra. I was 7 years old or something. And then, so that was in primary school. I had a really enthusiastic music teacher who was totally just so enthusiastic and just loved, making the children communicate with art and music and everything. So that was something that was a really positive thing for me. I loved it so much, and I used to sing, I used to get involved with everything I could. I wasn't afraid of performing. I never had that. I was very confident as a young child. And when I was 12, I took up the sax because I wanted to be able to play jazz and be in the big band. And I remember when I went to secondary school, I was in the big band playing flute, but I remember sitting there thinking, I want to be on the front line with everyone else playing sax, And I remember asking my teacher, and he said, saxophone is difficult to pick up after the flute. And I thought, okay, yeah. And then I took to it like this. I loved it. I practiced. I didn't even care that I didn't know how to solo in a jazz band. I think I just steamed through the pentatonics, not even knowing that's what it was, just standing there. I loved it. I loved the spotlight. I wasn't a shy child at all. And then I went to college. So I would always be, doing the jazz bands or orchestra, or everything I could do, I did. And I did my 6th form. I did 2 years 6th form. And I didn't even know you could study performance of an instrument in higher education. And my academic music teacher said, why don't you just go to music college? Because I was applying to university to do an academic music degree. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. What is that? And he said, you go and you can just perform. I thought, what? That's a thing. All right. Then I had a look, and it was like a week before the deadline, and I just applied to everywhere. I just did it. And I had two amazing teachers at sixth form. My flute teacher went to the Royal Academy in London here, and my sax teacher had done a lot of West End stuff. So I practiced my butt off. I wanted that so much, but I didn't think I was going to get it because I just didn't know anything about it. I genuinely didn't even know what classical saxophone was. I just played the saxophone. I did my exams and I loved doing it. Played in all the bands at school. I loved singing classical music. I was in the choirs. Everything I could do, I did, And then I found out that I got a place there. I just went in and I played how I play, and they really liked me, and everywhere offered me a place. So I picked the place furthest from home because I wanted to be independent as an 18-year-old and just go and live somewhere else. So I just went with that place, and it turned out to be one of the best places in the UK to study saxophone.
Which was?
Which was the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester. Okay. And it just kind of took me there. It wasn't something that I'd had pre-planned. I didn't know that I wanted to be a soloist or this. I just loved the saxophone, and I wanted to go and do that. And so I did. And like I said, when I got there, I knew nothing, and I was super intimidated. I was like, oh, wow, these people know what they're doing, and they've had teachers that would be preparing them for this rather than you just do your thing, But actually it worked in my favor because, like I said, I was able to absorb stuff so quickly. And the amount I improved in the first year was insane. I knew nothing to being able to do a lot, So then I did 4 years there. In my third year, I landed my Riverdance gig at 21. Oh, wow. So I was still studying at that time, which was awesome because I kind of springboarded out, into the real world, but I still was studying. So I had both going on at the same time, which was really good. So yeah, I did my undergrad there, and I was still working with Riverdance. And then I had a year out on a tour, and then I went back to the RNCM, and they run this course called the International Artist Diploma, which they only offer to four possible students every year. It's not a saxophone thing. It's across all disciplines, and you get a year of free study, and you do a concerto with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra. So I was like, I want to do that. But rather than play an existing piece, I always wanted to play new stuff and have new things. And I wanted to have this buzz, and I wanted to create my artistic identity from then. I wanted to be doing that when I was at college. I didn't want to leave and go, right, what do I care about? What do I want? I wanted to start doing that. So I commissioned a composer named Tom Harold to write me a piece, and he wrote me a soprano saxophone concerto, which was epic. And I premiered it with the BBC Phil, and it was broadcast. So
wow.
Yeah. That was that was the last gig I did at college then as the International Artist Diploma. And then I kind of springboarded out into the real world and was doing a lot of gigs and traveled to Australia as a guest artist there for a festival. Yeah, there's been loads of stuff that's kind of happened. So it's been kind of crazy, to be honest.
This is so amazing. Congratulations on like all the successes. This is crazy. And the thing that struck me, so it's different in the UK compared to the US. So like, there's no exams per se here. And I'm assuming the exams are the ABRSMs?
Yeah, pre-college, ABRSM until grade 8.
Okay, so my question is, like you said, when you got to music college, you felt like you knew nothing. But were the ABRSMs that you took, were they just the performance ones? You didn't have to take theory or anything like that?
So, well, actually, now you say that. So I did ABRSM up until grade 5, and then you have to take a theory test, but I had no interest in that, so I moved to the jazz grades. And I just did I did Trinity jazz grades until grade 8. So it would be rather than theory and scales, you did exercises and more pieces of music, basically, in a more jazz style. So yeah, I skipped across to that, and I did that, tick those boxes. I did find there were a lot of holes in my knowledge, though, in terms of reading. I was a terrible sight reader when I started college. I was so scared, going into ensembles and stuff. Orchestras, I was so scared. And what really made me come out of that was being in a saxophone quartet in a soprano seat, because you have nowhere to hide. So I just bucked my ideas up, and I got better. And then I'm fine. Yep, fine reader now. But that was a big hurdle at the start for sure.
Wow. Okay. I got to dive into that more. Something I just wrote down a note, Trinity Jazz. So I know ABRSMs also has a jazz component too, but what is Trinity? What is that?
Trinity is a conservatoire here in the UK, Trinity Laban School of Music and Dance. So they have jazz grades. There's a few syllabuses as well as ABRSM. ABRSM is the most common one to do. But yeah, Trinity is an alternative route that you can do, which is based mostly on like studies rather than scales and things like that. It would be more in context rather than, here, play this scale and this scale, and you must sit this exam. It's like, no, we're going to perform, we're going to play some studies, and and that was kind of my bag. I loved doing that, so that was a good fit for me at that time.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I'm not aware of that, and I'm sure a lot of people that are not from UK are not aware of it either. So thank you for sharing that. And what's interesting, you mentioned the word context. And it sounds like, you did like you mentioned, you did a lot of playing, you sang, you did everything, during primary school, secondary school, all that kind of thing. But then how did you said you were not a great sight reader, so to speak, but then how did you manage, playing in all these ensembles during your primary and secondary years? Do you feel like you're stronger by ear than by reading?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, now I'd say it's probably equal, but definitely back then, I mean, I remember sitting my music A level, and we had 3 components. We had history of music, composition, 4, performance. They were all fine. And then we had Bach chorales, right? And oh, wow, did I not understand any of it? Nothing. I was sat there thinking, why can I not understand this? Like, I just couldn't get it. And I did not enjoy that part of it. And I remember my teacher telling me, you're in chamber choir, you're an alto singer. Why can't you, figure out this voicing? Because as an alto singer, you're not the tune. So you have to kind of know what you're doing. I just had good ears. That was it. And I could just fit in, and I knew then where to kind of adjust to. And that was always the way, even in orchestra. Like, we were playing, like, I don't know, Hall of the Mountain King or something. And I'd be like, oh, well, I know this one, so I can play this one, right? But oh my gosh, you make me come in on a note by myself, sight reading as a 16-year-old. Oh wow, like that was a stressful time, but it definitely improved. Like, as I said, when I had to lead a group, then I was like, right, Emma, there's nowhere to hide here. You have to just learn. So I just practiced and made myself better at it, because it was a huge hole. My gosh.
Well, this is thank you for sharing that. And I have 2 questions, but let me go to the right side of you for a second. And you have students. How do you approach teaching your students? Knowing what you just said to me, like, how do you approach teaching your students? Do you have them learning by ear first and then reading? Based on, like you said, the holes that you were going through.
Yeah, I make sure they learn in as many ways as I can teach them. We experiment with learning by ear, with learning by reading, with the scales and stuff like that. I do this with all my students. It's like, scales are the way that you can play virtuosically, in context, right? If you know all your scales, you're going to be able to play in whatever key that you want. You can then play without the music freely, because you know how to navigate the instrument. So we play by ear for sure. I'll get them to learn a tune without the dots, but then we'll practice exam sight reading, we'll practice the set pieces, we'll be going through scales. I just try and incorporate as many components as I can to the way that they learn, because I know that some ways they're going to take to more than others. So if I just offer them as many ways, then I don't know, I feel like we're going to get somewhere. But they also know the importance of like note values, learning to not be embarrassed when you're making a mistake, because learning by ear is trial and error, right? So you're learning with mistakes. So yeah, that's kind of the way I'd like to go about that. Anyway, awesome. It seems to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let me also ask you too, like, who were your most influential mentors?
Okay. And like from a young age, or?
Actually, I could say throughout. So like, who were your most influential mentors from, when you were in like primary, secondary school, but then also college, and even now, if you have any mentors now?
So when I was younger, I'd say, as when I was in primary school, I think my primary school music teacher, really that's where it all came from. She was so enthusiastic, and I loved that energy and vibe. So that I think that's what made me want to continue. Secondary school, it was definitely the extracurricular groups that I think it was the groups that kind of motivated me, because I wanted to be able to play within those groups, right? So obviously your teacher's a mentor, of course, and they help you learn the instrument. But I was part of a sax quartet, and I thought it was so cool. I was like 15 years old. We were all girls, and we were playing like funk and stuff like that. And I was thinking, this is so cool. Like we can actually do this, just us four, and like being in a jazz band, but playing in an orchestra and playing in a flute group and all this stuff. And I was like, I love being able to hold my own in this. I love being able to turn up and do my thing. And that was the thing that drove me when I was younger. And the same at college with choir and everything. And I think I loved the social element as well, because I'm a big social person, which is why COVID sucks. That's not just why COVID sucks, but that is a big downside. But I love that about the industry in itself as an adult, as a professional. You go to a gig, you play a gig, it's social, it's you meet other musicians, you can collaborate with them if you want to, you learn so much from other musicians that play in different genres. So I think the actual environment itself was a big driving force for me. But when I was at music college, then my brain was like, it just was, the capacity just grew so much, and I just couldn't believe I hadn't known about half of the stuff that I was learning at that time. My teacher, Rob Buckland, he was a big influence, because I'd never heard anyone play the saxophone like that before. I didn't even know it was a thing. And then you got someone like Tim McAllister, who I worked with quite closely when I was studying. I was very lucky to have his help a lot when I was studying in kind of the second half of my college experience. I actually flew out to Detroit I was in Michigan to have some lessons with him. And also the sax congresses. You meet thousands of sax players at these events. And so it's definitely all driven by, the possibility of meeting like-minded people and working with different people. And even on the show, I'm meeting folk musicians, trad musicians. I wouldn't have a clue what they were doing. And then you meet these people and you think, oh, actually, I love that. I want to do this. Or, okay, I can take influence from that actually. And I don't know, I love absorbing stuff. It's just the best thing about being a musician.
That's awesome. And what's interesting to me, you were mostly ear driven in terms of your learning. And then you were participating in all these groups. And then I think, to me, like, that's the ideal, because then you were ready to see, all the stuff then you were ready to absorb the theory and absorb, more reading and stuff like that. Whereas opposed to if you started out with the theory and the reading, it may not have been as exciting.
I agree. And I think I'd probably have been more nervous. Don't get me wrong, being exposed in like wind orchestra as an 18-year-old who, you can't sight read that well I was so scared. I was, oh gosh, but it wasn't embarrassment. I was like, why don't I know this? And I always took if things went wrong, it would be like motivation for me. I would never admit defeat with anything. And I'm still like that. If I don't know something, I'm not ashamed. I just make sure next time I know, and that was always the way, that was always my kind of way through music college. And yeah, you're right. I had good ears. So I was always able to blend with a group, play as a musician with other people. It was just the technique stuff that needed sorting out. But I think because that's more black and white, you can kind of just be like, right, practice and you're going to get better,
Absolutely. And speaking of practice, so let me ask you, when you were actually going through school, growing up and stuff, what was your practicing routine like? And what's your practicing routine like? I could say during COVID, I'll ask that, but I'll also ask when you're, heavily involved with Riverdance and all the other stuff you're doing. So can you talk about the evolution of your practicing and the types of things that you do?
Yeah, of course. When I was at college, I think because was from the age of 18 to 22, you're kind of just, you're becoming an adult as well. You're living alone. You're learning all these things, about life and everything as well. So for me, that was as equally as important as practicing and, being super disciplined. But because I was so excited about all this new information, I just wanted to be in college all the time practicing, but it was like a work hard, play hard thing. So I would make sure I did my, 4 hours a day in practice, whether that was on my own or was with someone else or whatever that situation was. Every day I did 2 hours of quartet, 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. Every day, saxophone quartet, Monday to Friday, without any exception. I remember we wanted to be like the group at college. It's a big, we all had a similar drive. And we actually won like the chamber music competition. I think we were in our second year, which is crazy because there were people that have been there postgrads and everything for 4 or 5 or 6 years, and we came in as second and first years. So that was awesome. That was great. So I was always kind of driven by my own interest to be able to do all these things, extended techniques. I wanted to be able to double tongue. I wanted to be able to be fluent in altissimo. I wanted to be able to tongue really fast, all this stuff. I wanted to be able to do it. It's just my own competitive nature, I think. But when I left, it was much more, I'm practicing for a goal. I'm very goal orientated anyway. Similarly at college too, if I didn't have anything on, that was harder. I found it harder to motivate myself. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, which is why COVID is so difficult because there are no gigs. So it's hard to make yourself do stuff, which is why we created our project, LocktheSaxDown, to give that to people. When I'm gigging, especially on tour, I try and make my practice as efficient as I can because I don't have a lot of time at all. For example, here's a scenario. The Riverdance gig is all from memory, 2 hours from memory. And I'd never memorized a single thing in my life before I auditioned for that gig, ever. I'd never played from memory, ever in my life, not even in a recital, nothing. And when I got the gig, they were like, right, okay, you have a week and then we start rehearsals. And I had to learn the entire 2 hour show in 1 week from memory, no dots. So that was like you have no option other than to do this because failing is not an option, So I did that. And then when I was on tour, I wanted to enter the concerto competition at college. And I didn't want the fact I was on tour to stop me from doing the classical stuff because I love both things. So every day in the gap, in the interval in the show, I would put my headphones on and listen. It was John Mackey's saxophone concerto for soprano and wind orchestra. And it's 5 movements long, and I would put it on and play as much of it as I could. And then in the evenings, if I wasn't socializing, I would be reading through the dots, learning, remembering in the breaks, right? Put the headphones on, go, play. And because I was playing the show from memory as well, my brain was just able to absorb so much information. And I learned the piece and I won the competition when I got home.
Wow. And again, as like a little mini recap, it's your experiences growing up, and everything was mostly ear driven.
Yeah.
That really helped you to succeed. And it really helped you with Riverdance.
Yeah.
For sure. Because if you were taught, it's very common in the US for people to be taught to read and play at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
so then you become like, you can't not have that page in front of you.
Yeah.
But, in your situation, ear driven, all that kind of thing. And then you learn the dots, so to speak, later on. But that really helped you. And what's interesting is what you're saying right now, learning another concerto, you're listening to it over and over and over again. You're kind of picking it out by ear. And then when you get home later, just checking it to see what you did. Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, with super virtuosic passages and stuff like that, I would always have the notes with me, but it would always be a reference, because I knew this competition you had to play from memory. There was no option. I didn't want not to be able to perhaps succeed with that because I couldn't play the whole thing. So I was like, right, no, you got to do it. You got to make yourself do it. So yeah,
Absolutely.
That was the drift.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, because we're in COVID right now, you haven't performed with, been on tour with Riverdance for, I'm going to say almost a year at this point. Are you, right? Are you practicing? Are you still like reviewing everything? Because it's all by memory, so you don't want to lose that.
Not really. I mean, I've been playing the show for nearly 5 years. So
so it's really, it's
just
that's true.
there, and I've done, because I recorded the album as well a couple of years ago, and there's all these little things that come up that we have to do. We had to do this remote thing with the Riverdance band when COVID hit. We were all sent home from the tour, so we did little online things, and it's always there. For some reason, it's never left me. If I, it's like if I've got 2 weeks before I've got to go and play, I'll be, reminding myself, playing along with the tracks, but I never need to look at the dots, never need to look at the music anymore. It's mostly playing the notes, but there's a lot of improvisation in the show. Again, there's a lot of solos I take. So yeah, it's a kind of creative role. It's cool.
It's awesome. It's so interesting. It's so interesting, just as, again, like another little mini recap, how multi-genre you are, all the types of things that you're doing and how everything, is coming together into forming who you are as a player.
Yeah, it's definitely been something that I took a long time to actually accept. Weirdly, I thought it was a drawback rather than a positive thing. I was always so worried about confusing my identity as something that wasn't classical. I remember thinking when I was at college, I'm going to be that classical player. I'm going to be that classical soloist. That's what I wanted. And I still want that. And I still do that. And that's part of who I am. And that was part of how I learned. But it's also, I think COVID has taught me a lot in being restricted. And I love music. Like, it's music. I'm not a classical saxophonist. I am sometimes, but I think for me, and I've said this on a couple of other podcasts that I've been on, it's all about learning the instrument to the best of my ability to be able to operate successfully in the styles of music that I love. And why not then be able to use your instrument and play in those styles? I think we're lucky that the saxophone is so versatile, more so than a lot of other instruments. So you can do I play a lot with DJs. I love doing that, fusion, pop, folk, classical, like proper classical. And I think because I had such a exciting experience when learning the instrument to an advanced standard, I just wanted to be good at being a technician of it. And now it's like, okay, well, I know I can play the instrument. All right, what music do I want to play? As long as I'm executing it well and I'm happy with it, then I don't see any boundaries, whereas before I'd be really worried about, especially on social media, confusing the image and thinking, oh no, but that's not what I do. I'm this classical person. It's like, well, no, actually I think the most exciting thing is that I'm able to kind of cross these over, still play with a good technique, but I'm free to do whatever I want. And I think that for me is important now. I've realized that it's a big thing for me, and in terms of like who I am as an artist, for sure. So
that's huge. Now I have to ask you then, to become the saxophonist that you are, to become a great technician, what are some things specifically that you practice now or that you've practiced to help get you there?
I remember my mind being blown in my second year, being told that I was breathing wrong. And I thought, what? It's like, what? I've been playing the saxophone for years. How can I be breathing wrong, you know? Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, it's like I said before about soprano, you know, making sure that you're breathing properly and supporting your air. And that really does pick people out from the mix. If you're playing with a supported sound and a good technique in terms of your breath control and air, oh man, you can make that instrument sing, you know, whatever style you want, you know. And I think that is such a huge thing to be enforcing if you're a teacher, or, you know, and it's just so useful because you can ping through a group or an ensemble, but you can sit back. You have so much flexibility with the sound that you make, and that all comes from air support. So I remember learning all that and thinking, oh my gosh, you know, this just seems like such a huge thing. When you get it, you've got it, and you'll never forget it. You'll never forget it. And it's something that I make sure that my students understand, is the need for good air support. You know, we play a wind instrument. That has to be the number one thing that we're thinking about. It's like, we're blowing. You got to have a good technique for doing that, you know, efficiently. So that was that.
Can I interrupt and ask you, can you give one tip with regard to that? Like, what was the aha moment for you? You said that they told you were breathing wrong. I can only assume that maybe you were breathing, you know, from around where your collarbone is compared to lower.
Yes, I actually away, and this isn't for everybody, but releasing your bottom jaw and your lip from the mouthpiece and the reed, it forces you to breathe down rather than if you pinch breath from the side, you hold a lot of tension up in your chest. So that's something definitely good to remember. Obviously, you can't always take such a big breath. If you're playing something that you have a tiny space to breathe, you can't go because it's just not, you know, you can't make it work. But when you get that and you've practiced that, even if you do breathe from the side and you have to snatch your breath, you just learn to make it more efficient. So that was a real big light bulb moment for me. Remove your bottom lip and jaw from the mouthpiece to take a breath, and it forces you to breathe down rather than to snatch a breath and to get it stuck, if you like, and you won't have as much power behind the sound.
Wow, that's a fantastic tip. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's okay.
All right. Now, so what other, like now we're in COVID, so what kinds of things are you working on now, aside from the LocktheSaxDown, you know, quarantine series, so to speak? What kinds of things are you practicing now?
So obviously the album's all recorded. So in terms of that, we're doing remote mixing things and all that kind of stuff. I am learning a lot of Irish tunes, actually. I wanted to expand my repertoire of that kind of genre. I love it. It's a new thing that I've realized that I really like. So I've been learning a lot of tunes and listening to a lot of whistle players, actually, because I want, as I kind of said before, to emulate the style and use a lot of double articulation. So I've been kind of working on that a bit. I've just been playing the music that I want to play, and whatever I feel like practicing, I practice. I don't have a very strict schedule with myself at the moment because there's not a lot going on, and I think you can get quite bogged down if you put too much pressure on yourself right now. I feel like that, you know, if I don't have goals, it's almost like there's an infinite amount to learn all the time, you know, because you can't put it into context. And I think I've said that before. Context for me is such a huge part. You know, you can learn all this stuff, but if you're never going to use it, what's the point? You know, which is why the double articulation thing for something like Irish music, and to try and emulate that style of a whistle player, for example, there's the context right there. You know, you can play with somebody like that and not stick out, you know, of the mix. So I've been trying to test myself in terms of things like that, and doing remote recordings, a few covers, and just trying to play convincingly in a lot of different styles, and just to maintain that. And actually what works for me at the moment is if I find a tune I like, no matter what genre, I'm probably going to learn it, you know, and record it. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
This is what I love that you just said, you know, you're goal oriented, which is great, but sometimes it can still be so overwhelming because there's so much to learn. You know, you'll never be able to learn all this stuff. And so you added the word context, and you said, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to learn double tonguing or something like that because, this particular person, in Riverdance or this role in Riverdance is using this. And I want to be able to reflect that in my own playing and have a conversation with them. And that's what makes the goal more achievable also. But it, like you said, it gives it context. It gives it a purpose.
That's it, purpose. Yeah. And I think, I learned double tongue when I was playing classical stuff, because there's a lot of that in especially contemporary repertoire. But it's nice that you can use it in another context. And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, brilliant. That's another reason to just keep practicing it, and experimenting with where you can use it. And I think it's nice that it's not just for super contemporary saxophone repertoire. You can use it in more corporate styles, and even playing with my pop mouthpiece, I try and do like a cool riff or lick or loop or something like that, using these things. And I just try at the moment to have as much fun as I can and remember why I play, because you can get very in your own head, especially without having that release as a performer,
Absolutely. And you know what? Let me ask you this question. Everybody likes this question. Is there a tool, and I'm going to keep it specific to, saxophone playing as opposed to like just in general, but is there a tool that's like under $100 that you feel you can't live without, that's helped you, in terms of your performance or your practicing or whatever? I just stopped you.
Oh my
I
gosh,
didn't prepare you for this either.
I'm like, okay, let's think. This might sound so cheesy because it's so cheap. I can't say that. It's surely so obvious. I love metronomes. Oh,
yeah, that's
metronomes. Fine. That's it, and I make my students play with the metronome all the time because, what do we do when we get nervous and we're practicing? We rush. If we can play something really well, we rush. If we can, if we can't really play something well, probably going to rush through it and hope for the best, And I just think timing is such a big thing, not in every genre, really. It's about finding that groove, even in classical music, especially actually in folk music too. You want to be able to play horizontally and with people and kind of just like glide through without zooming off on your own or playing like bumpy. I don't know. And I think you stick a metronome on, you play your scales and you play them musically, that's going to set you up right there for, getting into good habits. If you have a difficult bar of something that's super difficult, contemporary repertoire, you put a metronome on, bump it up, you're going to get better at it, gradually. If you keep practicing with it and increasing the speed, I couldn't live without it. It sounds very cheesy, but it's just the best, the best tool, more than a tuner for me, actually. So.
Well, interesting. Is there any particular metronome that you use, or like a lot of people? I recommend the tonal energy app, which is a tuner and a great metronome onto that.
What's my metronome? It is called Tempo, I love that. Yeah, because you can kind of tap on you can see the beats like with the circles, and you can tap on each one, make different sounds, so that you can hear different beats emphasized. So in jazz, for example, if you're practicing on the 2 and 4, and that's useful. You can subdivide. It's a handy tool. I think my teacher told me to get this a good few years ago, so I got that and I've never deleted it. So yeah, I always suggest to download that one, just from my experience.
No, great. And I wasn't aware of that app, so I'm just writing that down even for myself.
It's good, yeah.
To check that out. Now, so, we're going to be coming out of COVID. We will be. What's coming up on the horizon for you, if anything, for the rest of like 2021?
2021. So a lot of corporate work, a lot of corporate gigs, that kind of thing. Just trying to get gigging again, like it will just be commercial stuff at the moment. There's not a huge amount going on in terms of classical performance. However, we are looking towards the congresses and stuff like that I think next year is happening, Japan, if it can go ahead, and the European Congress, which is in Trento in Italy. We will hopefully we'll take this Lock the Sax Down project, and the album will be out and it will be available. So live concerts and things like that definitely happening. Riverdance tours within the next couple of years. I'll be back on the road with them. Not sure as of yet what dates or where, because they have a couple of companies touring at the same time. So it depends, US or UK or whatever. But it'll be one of those. So that's happening. What else? I just feel like I'm so in this album at the moment. I think when I get it out, it's going to be like, oh my goodness, I have to think about my life in real life rather than on the computer. I do feel like I'm living in like a virtual world. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, that is so true. I know they talk about this term, this concept of Zoom fatigue.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Based on what you said before too, where you feel that you're a social person, you need to be around people. So I could only imagine, how stressful this can be. But this is another little mini recap, but we started off talking about the LocktheSaxDown, idea and concept and project. And let me ask you this question. So will this continue, for you? Because it could lead to other albums and, you created a community too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so glad we did it for so many reasons. It's really set us up well. I mean, we're amazing friends, Jen and I now, and, not just music stuff, but like friends, proper friends, which is really, really great, especially to have a composer that you're so close with. It's very freeing to be able to co-write some of the stuff. I mean, she's a brilliant composer. She plays so many instruments. That is just, honestly, it's the best. She's the best person to work with. And we've had inquiries about going out places to visit and to kind of tell the story and to share the music and, masterclasses and things like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that springs back from it, because we've reached so many people, it's virtually. So once this is over, I can see there being a big, hype for how did you get through the pandemic? How did you manage? What did you do? And I think we have something to show, not just for us, but for a lot of people. It benefited so many people. We did some kind of testimonial videos. We asked a few participants to kind of make their videos of what they liked about it. And that was for our Kickstarter campaign, to try and raise the money. And it was just so nice to listen to how it's affected people in such a good way and provided weekly goals, which is what I said is important for a lot of people practicing and without having performances and stuff like that. So yeah, I think we've got some plans for sure, to expand the idea and I think it's going to be long lasting for sure. This isn't something that we'll forget. The pandemic's not something we're going to forget. It's just, as much as it's been really, really tough, it's definitely put a pin or a mark in our careers, so to speak. And yeah, it's a great thing that's come off such a bad situation, so I'm very proud of the project, and proud of us for doing that, and I'm proud of everyone else for jumping at the chance to be involved. And I just it's kind of emotional. Actually, it's just like really powerful.
Yeah, no, that's a great word, powerful, for sure. And, it's definitely helped so many people. How can people they could search for the hashtag, right? But how can people find out more about that, about the album coming out, your website? Give us your links, give us all the information.
Yeah, so my website is emmamcphilemy.com. So it's just my name. And you'll find there's a Lock the Sax Down tab on there. There's Jenny's website, so that's jennywatson.com. There's a Lock the Sax Down tab there. It's got all of the downloads, all the demos, all the information, everything. If you go on my Instagram, I have a link in my bio that has, and then links to literally everything. My YouTube channel, I've got links to my website, the Lock the Sax Down tab again. It's everywhere. On my Facebook page, So yeah, the links are there. The hashtag is there. If you follow the hashtag, you'll find all the videos and all the demos and stuff like that. We're actually putting up another video today that I've been working on. We came up with a new track literally last week, which was not the idea. We had 12 tracks and they were signed off. I'd been in the studio, that was done. But we found the track order really hard to come up with. And I always find, I think that's probably one of the hardest things about releasing a CD is what order do we put this music in? There's many reasons to choose different orders. And we then came up with another track the other day. So now we have 13 and we've just signed off on that one, but it's a really exciting one. And it's just tied the entire concept together, which is just so awesome. So there's a video going out on that, and it's kind of like a behind the scenes kind of vibe. So we're doing a few behind the scenes videos. So if you search me on YouTube, you'll find all that stuff there, and all the track teasers and stuff like that. So yeah, all over social media basically.
Oh, this is fantastic. And I'm going to put all these links in the show notes. So this way people can, find you on Facebook, your website, Jenny's website as well. Your Instagram. What's your at? What
Instagram? It's just Emma Saxophone.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Also, I probably should say so we released a single called Kilter, and that was in December. And we released that on Bandcamp. So if you search for Emma McPhilemy on Bandcamp, and that's where the album will be released as well, predominantly, I think. So yeah, my profile's there. So if you wanted to check out the single, that's up there for purchase.
Terrific. This is great. And again, this information is going to go in the show notes. Emma, I am so glad that, we got the chance to chat and talk. You shared such amazing information, and it kind of went full circle in a sense, because I went totally out of order, but that's cool because
I love it.
No, it's great because we talked about, the LocktheSaxDown project, what you're doing during COVID. And, yes, we've been in this almost a full year, but just that brilliant idea and how it's just evolved into what it is now, into a new, a new single that's out, a new album that's out. Coming out, I should say.
Yeah.
All the connections you've made with people, the fact that you're a social person and you created community for people all over the world, 16 countries, right?
Yeah.
And, just even talking about your journey and, again, mostly ear-based with some reading, but, how that's really helped you later on, going to music school, and you were able to absorb everything so quickly because you had that base, that background, and how that really helped you to nail that Riverdance gig, and
yeah, it definitely helped.
Yeah, for sure. And, and winning concerto competitions and quartet competitions and all that kind of thing. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Emma. We really appreciate it.
No, I've had such a blast talking to you. Thank you for having me on. It's been great.